In 1626, the Dutch bought Manhattan Island for 60 guilders, roughly $24 in today's money. Everyone knows this story. What almost nobody knows is what happened to that $24 if the Native Americans had invested that money at a 7% return. Compounding annually, it would be worth over $5 trillion today. That's more than the current value of all land in Manhattan combined. But here's what is strange. Most people who learn this fact will do absolutely nothing with it. They'll nod, say interesting, and go back to checking stock tickers, crypto prices, or scrolling for the next hot investment tip. There is a force in finance so powerful that Einstein allegedly called it the eighth wonder of the world. It's made more millionaires than any technology, any stock, any real estate market. And yet, the entire financial system is designed to make you ignore it. Today, I'm going to show you why that is, how this force was deliberately hidden from everyday people for centuries, and why understanding it is the single most important financial decision you'll ever make. Let us go back to 1602. The Dutch East India Company had just invented something revolutionary, the joint stock company. For the first time in history, ordinary citizens could own a piece of a business enterprise. But there was a problem. These early investors quickly discovered something unsettling. When they calculated their returns, the math didn't work the way they expected. A 10% gain followed by a 10% gain didn't equal 20%. It equaled 21%, a small difference, barely noticeable. But the Dutch merchants were meticulous record keepers. They noticed that this bonus percentage kept appearing. And more strangely, it grew larger over time without them doing anything. The longer they held their shares, the bigger this mysterious extra return became. They had stumbled onto compound interest, though they didn't call it that yet. And almost immediately, the people in power realized something dangerous. If ordinary people truly understood this force, the entire social order might collapse. See, for thousands of years, wealth had been static. You inherited land, you worked land, you passed on land. Nobility stayed noble, peasants stayed peasants. But compound growth, that was exponential. It meant a merchant could theoretically surpass a duke, a tradesman could eclipse a lord. The implications were revolutionary and terrifying to those in power. The mathematics of compound interest had actually been understood for centuries by a very small group, moneylenders and monarchs. In medieval Europe, charging interest was considered a sin usury. The Catholic Church banned it outright, but there was a loophole. Jewish merchants, not bound by Catholic law, could lend money at interest. This made them indispensable to kings who needed to fund wars, but it also made them targets of resentment and persecution. The knowledge of compounding was literally dangerous. Then came the Italian merchants of the Renaissance. Families like the Medici discovered they could use compound interest to transform their businesses from local operations into continental powerhouses. But they kept their methods private, locked in ledgers written in code. By the 1600s, as stock markets emerged in Amsterdam and London, a new class of people gained access to compound returns. But here's the twist. The system was immediately structured to prevent most people from benefiting. Early stock exchanges required enormous minimum investments equivalent to hundreds of thousands of dollars today. Trading fees were exorbitant. Information was restricted to coffee houses where only wealthy merchants gathered. The barrier to entry wasn't accidental, it was architectural. Fast forward to 1792, the New York Stock Exchange is founded under a buttonwood tree on Wall Street. America is a new nation, built on Enlightenment ideals of equality and opportunity. Surely this market would be different. It wasn't. For the next 130 years, stock ownership remained the exclusive privilege of the wealthy. In 1900, less than 1% of Americans owned any stocks at all. The compound growth that could turn modest savings into fortunes remained locked behind walls of minimum investments, insider information, and deliberately complex systems. But then something changed. The 1920s saw the first real democratization of stock ownership. New technologies like the telegraph and ticker tape made information more accessible. Brokerages began offering installment plans you could buy stocks on credit. By 1929, about 10% of American households owned stocks. People were discovering the power of compound growth. Regular working people were seeing their modest investments double, triple, quadruple. Stories spread of secretaries and factory workers building substantial nest eggs. It seemed like the secret was finally out. The wealth-building power of compounding was becoming accessible to everyone, and then the system collapsed. October 1929, the stock market crashes, fortunes evaporate. But here's what's rarely discussed. The crash didn't just destroy wealth, it destroyed faith in compound growth. In the aftermath, stock ownership plummeted. By 1952, only 6.5% of Americans owned stocks. An entire generation associated the market with catastrophe, not compound growth. The collective trauma was so deep that people who lived through the Depression often kept their money in literal mattresses until they died. The financial establishment's response? They didn't try to restore faith in long-term compound investing. Instead, they created new barriers. Regulations that were supposedly for investor protection also made it harder and more expensive for ordinary people to invest. Minimum account balances soared. Commission fees consumed any gains from small investments. But something else was happening simultaneously, something more insidious: the rise of consumer credit. In the 1950s and 60s, while compound growth and investments remained difficult to access, compound interest on debt became easier than ever. Credit cards were invented, car loans expanded. Mortgages became ubiquitous. The same mathematical force that could build wealth was weaponized to extract it. Think about that. Compound interest working for you was kept difficult and expensive. Compound interest working against you became frictionless and encouraged. By the 1970s, policymakers realized there was a retirement crisis brewing. People weren't saving, they weren't investing. Social Security wasn't going to be enough. The solution? The 401k, introduced in 1978, finally, a mechanism to help regular people access compound growth, with tax advantages to boot, except it didn't quite work out that way. The 401k system was immediately complicated by restrictions, penalties, matching formulas, and vesting schedules. More importantly, it introduced something new: the fund manager. Now there was a middleman taking fees, typically 1 to 2% annually. Sounds small, right? But remember, compound interest works both ways. Over 30 years, a 2% annual fee can consume 40% of your potential returns. The very force meant to build your wealth was being siphoned off. Meanwhile, financial media exploded. Cable news, financial publications, investment newsletters, all encouraging constant trading, hot stock tips, market timing. The exact opposite of long-term compound growth. The message became, don't just sit there, do something. When the secret of compound growth is actually, don't just do something, sit there. Today, we're living through the same pattern on steroids. Consider these numbers. The average holding period for a stock in 1960 was 8 years. Today, less than 6 months, people are trading more than ever while benefiting from compounding less than ever. Cryptocurrency promised to democratize wealth building. Instead, it has created a casino where people chase 100x returns tomorrow while ignoring 10% returns compounded over decades. The same pattern emphasized the spectacular short-term possibility, ignore the reliable long-term mathematics. Even more revealing, look at savings rates. Americans who lived through the Depression had savings rates above 20%. Today, it's under 5%. We have easier access to investment tools than any generation in history. Apps that let you invest with $1, and yet people save and invest less. Why? Because compound growth is boring. It's not a story, it doesn't make headlines. Here is a fact that should shock you. If you invest $500 a month starting at age 25, with a 10% average annual return, you'll have over $3.2 million by age 65. That's nearly guaranteed wealth, assuming historical market averages continue. But if you wait until age 35 to start, you'll have only $1.1 million. Starting just 10 years later costs you $2.1 million. That's the power and the fragility of compound growth. Time is the irreplaceable ingredient, yet our entire culture is designed to make you wait. I'll start investing when I make more money, when I pay off debt, when I understand the market better. Meanwhile, every year you wait, you're not just losing that year's potential return. You're losing that return compounded over every year thereafter. So what do you do with this information? 3 things. First, start immediately, even absurdly small. The mathematics don't care you start with $10 or $10,000. What matters overwhelmingly is time in the market. A person who invests $200 a month starting at 20 will likely end up wealthier than someone who invests $1,000 a month starting at 40. Not because of discipline, because of mathematics. Second, minimize friction and fees. Every fee, every transaction cost, every tax implication works against compounding. Index funds, tax-advantaged accounts, automatic investments, these aren't exciting, but they're mathematically optimal. The financial industry makes billions by adding complexity. Your job is to ruthlessly eliminate it. Third, ignore almost everything. Market predictions, hot stocks, crypto pumps, real estate flipping, these are narratives designed to extract money from you through fees, bad timing, or both. The uncomfortable truth is that boring, consistent, long-term investing beats almost every active strategy over time, not sometimes, almost always. Here is what keeps me up at night. We're living in the first era in human history where the mathematics of wealth building are completely transparent and accessible to everyone. The barriers that kept compound growth from ordinary people for centuries have largely fallen. And yet, most people still won't benefit from it. Not because they can't, because the same system that removed the old barriers has created new ones: psychological, cultural, informational. An entire apparatus designed to keep you trading, switching, optimizing, worrying. To keep you doing anything except the one thing that actually works: investing consistently over long periods. The secret isn't secret anymore. It's hidden in plain sight. So here's my question for you. Now that you know this, what will you actually do? Will you be part of the statistical majority who nods, says interesting, and changes nothing? Or will you be boring enough, patient enough, disciplined enough to let compound growth do what it has done for centuries for the few people who understood it? The choice, as it always has been, is entirely yours. If this changed how you think about building wealth, hit subscribe. I break down the systems and patterns in finance that everyone talks around but nobody explains. And drop a comment. What's one thing stopping you from starting to invest today? I read every single one.